Dave Briggs, Regional President of Fifth Third Bank of Tennessee. What a difference a year makes. The COVID experience challenged each of us to pause for a moment and think about new ways to continue to serve Nashvillians, businesses, family, and our community. As one of the country's largest banks, ninth largest in the U.S., we're big enough to provide sophisticated solutions, expert guidance, while at the same time, we're empowered to make local decisions, to invest in Nashville's future, to serve community agencies, help Nashville and you to rebound from the challenges of 2020. During the pandemic, we've helped thousands gain financial relief or assistance from the hardships they're facing. We funded local hunger, education, housing, and social service initiatives. And we are working with civic leaders to help jumpstart our economy. We're here for you. We are invested in Nashville, and we're invested in our future. Thank you. In an industry that is the backbone of Nashville.
I'm David Wenger, founder and CEO of Bridge Connector, a company changing the way healthcare communicates. We provide a scalable solution for big technology vendors, digital health, providers, and payers. We allow them to automate the workflows between the disparate technologies that they've already bought to make sure that they work seamlessly across the spectrum of care and to make sure that ultimately we create a successful patient experience. Thank you for joining today's event. I encourage you to visit us at bridgeconnector.com to learn more.
Hello, good afternoon. I was going to say good morning, but it's already afternoon. And welcome to Nashville Post's Vitals. Happy to have you all here. Happy to be talking about virtual reality in healthcare. Before we get rolling, I do need to say thank you to Fifth Third Bank and Bridge Connector for sponsoring our event today. This is the third year that Bridge Connector is involved with our Vitals event, and we're really happy to have them on board again. We're happy to have Fifth Third join us as well. I know we have some folks with us from both organizations, so say hi to them when you get a chance. And also, you want to stick around to the end. We'll have some goodies to give away, so there's a little treat for you waiting. Also need to say thank you to our partners at Tennessee HIMSS, who have helped us promote this event and have helped us for a couple of years now on these types of events. We're glad they're back on board. If you're interested in learning more about health technology, you want to check out their upcoming October 29th event called Summit 20. That's at tnhims.org. With that, let's get rolling. Let's talk about virtual reality in healthcare and where it is today and where it's going. And to do that with us are Trisha Coady, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Clinical Solutions at HealthStream. Good morning, Trisha. I said good afternoon. Good afternoon still.
That's right. Good afternoon.
Gani. Aaron Gani is here as well. He is founder and CEO of BehaVR, which has several applications for the market. And then also with us is Eller Mallchok of the early stage investment fund Jumpstart Foundry. Hello to you both.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Let's get rolling. Aaron, let's start with you. You're in the market with a couple of different products. Tell us a little bit about BehaVR and its origins and where things have come from the last couple of years.
Sure. Happy to do it, Garrett. Great to be with you today and to be with Eller and Trisha. So I founded BehaVR in 2016. At the time, I was in what you see behind me there on my wall, the Nashville Healthcare Council Fellows Program. Great program led by Senator Bill Frist and Larry Van Horn from Vanderbilt. And in that program, we bring together a range of senior leaders across healthcare. At the time, I was the CTO at Humana and had wanted my own business, been harboring this desire to start my own business for many years. And in the Fellows Program, we were really being challenged about what we were individually going to do to move healthcare forward and drive the kinds of changes and innovations that are needed. So for me, that was a final push over the edge into launching my own business. I had come to believe through my Humana years that we have huge gaps in how behavioral healthcare is accessed and delivered in the US and globally. And being a lifelong technologist, I also knew that in 2016, virtual reality was going from being something that had been in largely lab and research settings for the last couple of decades, but was coming out of that setting to be practical in a real world sense for, with consumer grade technology that could be integrated with cloud and analytics and mobility and so on. So that moment for me came together, and I said, we're going to found this company to focus on using this uniquely powerful medium of virtual reality to address gaps in behavioral healthcare. And so we're about 4 years in, and what we have is a company that delivers general wellness programs and digital therapeutics programs in the future that focus on stress, anxiety, and fear extinction. And in another setting and in a longer discussion, I could go into specifics of why VR in particular is so useful when you're dealing with things like exposure therapy and helping people learn to detect and manage their own state of anxious arousal and stress and anxiety and so on. But that's what we do: stress, anxiety, fear extinction. 2 main products in the market today, one around chronic pain, and then our just launched Nurture VR program for maternal mental health.
Okay. You mentioned that in your days at Humana, you saw that there were gaps in the behavior health applications. Is that how you see behavior playing a role, is really as opposed to a broader application, really finding spots that work? Is it more of a targeted uses that you're looking for?
Yeah, so gaps in behavioral health generally are about, to some extent, stigma. There's still a lot of people that are a little bit like, oh, that's not me, I don't necessarily need help. So stepping up and realizing it's okay. Many of us struggle with these conditions and it's all right to get help. And then we also have systemic challenges with capacity constraints and just barriers to getting care, whether it's insurance network kinds of conditions and cost and inconvenience and so on. So digital therapeutics generally can help to close those gaps. Most of what will be done on smartphones because they're so ubiquitous, right? Almost everybody has a smartphone. It's a great platform for building digital therapeutics. But for certain things, virtual reality is much, much more powerful. And I'd say that's a theme, and I suspect Eller and Trisha will talk about that too. Like, VR is not great for everything, but it's especially good for some things. And so we think, pointed at the right problems, it can be really, really powerful.
Excellent. That's an excellent transition there, Aaron. Appreciate it. We'll go right to Trisha from there to say, you made some news early this year with a partnership with another big local healthcare name, Community Health Systems, to talk about virtual reality in terms of resuscitation training. Can you walk us through the origins of that and maybe a little bit about what you've learned in the past couple of months?
Sure, and can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so we've been providing resuscitation or CPR programs to our healthcare organization customers for about 10 plus years, and launched a second resuscitation program with the American Red Cross last year. And really knowing that there was a 42% disparity in post-cardiac arrest survival across the US was such a big problem, and one that we wanted to address through innovation and experiential learning. As a consumer of healthcare, I want to know that if I went into cardiac arrest, my chances of survival are just as good in Tennessee as they are in California or Idaho. So one of the key roles of the healthcare team during a cardiac arrest is that of team leader. And that team leader effectively coordinates all care provided to the patient in a cardiac arrest. So it's a pretty vital role if we want to improve outcomes. So in the announcement, we had partnered with CHS, which is, of course, headquartered here in Nashville. And we spent a few days there with a number of clinicians piloting our VR scenarios and received really great feedback. Some of the feedback was, really felt like I was in the room with the patient, as close as I've gotten to a real life scenario, really helped me to master the coordination of care. So certainly in healthcare, with those certain key things, VR is extremely powerful.
Okay. Eller, in terms of your viewpoint, coming from representing investors, obviously, but also kind of looking at the end markets that these technologies can go to, how have you seen VR kind of come into the market a little more? Because there were a couple of times in the past where, maybe some false starts, right? For a few years ago, where it was heralded as this is going to change everything, and like Aaron just said, well, no, it can change some things in parts. How do you view the market at this point?
Yeah, that's a great Yeah, that's a great kind of a great way to look at it, because I do think that, a few years ago there was so much hype and so much excitement about it, and really now, over the last kind of year, and particularly COVID bringing on kind of a big push and a big need for virtual, particularly virtual training, virtual learning. So some of what Trisha's talking about, but also, I mean, you've picked really great panelists, because I think both Trisha and Aaron kind of represent kind of the major areas in which VR, and in some ways kind of then extending them to AR, are going to be playing a bigger role. I think, one, no question, people are struggling with behavioral health, mental health issues, and I think any sort of virtual experience can help alleviate some of the isolation that people are feeling, through COVID, through all this time quarantining and being at home. So I think there is, one, not just a need for it, but there is now this, there's more of a willingness to adopt it, because in some ways the pandemic has forced us to adopt virtual engagement. I mean, look at us here. We're doing a conference kind of virtually, and I think people, almost because they're forced into this virtual setting, are going to be more okay with virtual engagement with providers. But again, I see kind of the trends within virtual reality really pushing towards mental and behavioral health, but also training and learning. I think there are a lot of things that can be done remote. We're really, again, learning that a lot now and over the past couple of months. And so I think both Trisha and Aaron they're honestly the resident experts here, because they're working on building the actual technology. So.
Well, you all are doing a great job making it easy for me to transition, because my next question was going to be for Aaron and Trisha about objections from patients, but also from the users that you're working with. Aaron, have you seen those walls kind of break down in terms of people saying, well, I'm not going to do that, that's not going to work? Have the attitudes changed?
Definitely, they are changing and have changed a lot even since 2016 when we launched. Probably the most frequently mentioned thing is people will say, well, I've heard that, for some people they can get nauseous, or there can be sort of simulator sickness in VR. Isn't that a problem? And the short response to that is that with the technology that has come to market in the last few years, you have the processing power on board these headsets to keep the refresh rates well beyond a point where they cause that discomfort. So now you can still build bad content that doesn't perform well, but if your team knows how to build high performing content, which professional teams like hopefully ours, and I'm sure Trisha's do, then you can pretty much avoid that. There's a small minority, maybe 2 to 3% of folks who will still have a level of discomfort, which kind of has to do with, it's called vergence accommodation conflict, which is a kind of detailed optics and an issue related to our vision. So largely these concerns about side effects are pretty much over. The other major concern that gets voiced is more on sort of a business or operational side. Like, how do I deploy headsets? It's one thing if you're doing it in an enterprise setting, right? Like in offices or let's say hospitals, that's relatively straightforward these days. What if you want to go out to thousands or hundreds of thousands of homes, as we do? That has gotten a lot better in the last 18 months or so as well. So we can ship a headset to a patient's home. They unbox it. It's completely managed. You power it on. It's in our application. You cannot screw it up. We call that kiosk mode. And we have mobile device management tools that are on par with enterprise tools. So you can push updates and secure them and so on. So we've gotten to a point now where it's a pretty turnkey thing. We can say to a sponsor of care, for a simple per member per month fee, we'll put a headset in a patient's home. They can control it from their own smartphone and off they go. And of course, it's all connected to our cloud platform. So it's getting better by leaps and bounds every 6 to 12 months. There's more progress.
Yeah. Trisha, is it fair to say that you're seeing kind of the same, both in terms of the technology, but also the adoption and maybe the objections? Are you seeing a similar dynamic there?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Aaron. And I think with the recent onset of Oculus Quest and the sort of untethered devices, we've seen it dramatically improve in terms of the user experience, the ability to deploy, the ability to roll things out. But I would say in general, a lot of our healthcare organization leaders are really excited about VR, largely because they either can't afford to set up a sim center, or they have a sim center but are thinking about how do I scale experiential learning over time, because I'm only able to educate maybe 10% of my employees in my sim center. How do I really deploy that more broadly?
Yeah. Which leads me to another question. It's a tried analogy to make, but maybe Eller, you can take first crack at this one in terms of the classic baseball innings analogy. Where do you get the sense that VR is in terms of adoption and in the first to ninth inning kind of scale?
Yeah, I still think we're in early innings. That said, we're not in the first inning anymore. We're well beyond that. I don't know, gosh, fourth inning. If I really had to pick one, I think it's off the ground. We're lowering the barriers for both systems, so health systems, and kind of as Trisha's talking about, kind of more in like deploying within a system. We're there. That's great. As Aaron mentioned, the delivery to individuals and kind of mass distribution is definitely taking place. I think, again, COVID probably accelerated the adoption of that. So, I think if COVID had not happened, I still think we'd maybe be in some earlier innings. But I do think, again, that the current environment in our world right now is accelerating people, getting these solutions into either individuals' hands or into the hands of members of their organization, so that they can still effectively work, do their job, get the training they need. And so in some ways, like, we've kind of very sped through the first couple of innings, and we're now in a position to get more than halfway through the game. But I don't think we're quite past the halfway mark, if we're following the baseball inning analogy.
Yeah. Trisha, let me bounce that back to you, maybe for the same question, but also you mentioned the cost considerations that clients have to think about and the ability to scale and save money in this process. What's your answer in terms of the baseball innings?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the second or third inning, maybe. We're really beyond the very introductory phase of VR application, but there is still a lot of discovery that we'd like to do. So, our first version required a fairly significant hardware and software setup, though now have moved to Oculus Quest. Now, Oculus Quest is launching Quest 2, so I think we're seeing a lot of VR technology evolve at a fairly rapid pace. And so we're still learning, testing, getting feedback as we go. I think the one thing that we really set out to accomplish with VR is to make sure that we were leveraging the modality purposefully and where it's beneficial. So I think, some people can go to VR and think, well, I'm just going to try this new technology and apply it to everything. And I don't think that's true. I think there's a very specific purpose to VR, as well as, getting into data analytics. I still think there's a lot for us to study in that area as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the upfront cost, and especially in the hardware. Is that an obstacle that you found that has kept some people from addressing it, or is that becoming less of an issue?
Oh, I don't think it's an issue at all.
Okay.
I think now with the portability of it, it's extremely cost efficient when you think about I'm replacing not only a course development, a piece of knowledge that I have to run through, but I'm also replicating or enhancing the live simulation experience. Or in healthcare, we have a lot of peer-to-peer type learning in the field. And so I think if you think about the hourly wage of all these folks and the breadth that you have to educate, the volume of people that you have to educate, I think it's extremely cost efficient.
Okay. Aaron, go ahead.
Let me nerd out for a second on this question of what inning are we in, and we'll get a little geeky for a minute. Okay, so this is a Pico G2 headset. It's an all-in-one. It's similar to the Oculus Quest that Trisha was talking about. Not quite as powerful for some details we won't go into. But there's a couple of things related to this headset that are really going to continue to change rapidly over the next few years. One is the bulk of this unit. The reason it's so thick is mainly about the optics, right? So the lenses inside, there is a thin, digital display in there, but you need still some depth in the optics to sort of expand the visual field. And there are advances being made all the time that will make that sort of thickness, shrink, right? So it'll be much lighter weight and more comfortable. The other thing is all of the compute power to render all those graphics and do all that real-time calculation of changing visuals is in this device. Well, with 5G and edge computing, we weren't so far away from that graphics rendering moving to the edge of the cloud. So this won't happen overnight. It's probably going to take a couple of years is what it feels like. But it's not that far away until we'll have something that feels much more like a regular pair of glasses, because the optics are going to allow the lenses to be much thinner, and we can offload the graphics processing to the edge of the cloud. So that's when this stuff is going to get, from a technology perspective, that much more powerful, because now, our development teams, like at my shop and Trisha's, don't even have to be as frugal about how they use compute resources. So that was the geeky deep dive. The other thing that needs to happen, of course, is value. We have to show value for the buyer, which is always important in healthcare. And whether you're developing, simulations and training like Trisha is, there is one big category of VR use case that we haven't mentioned, which is sort of a functional rehab. So think physical and neurological rehab, and motivated and measured movement in 3 dimensions and so on. And then there's what we're doing with behavioral health. But in all cases, you have to be clear about how you're generating value for somebody, right? For an organization and how they train their staff, or for, let's say, a payer and employer and how you improve health outcomes through a behavioral health program. And it's still kind of relatively early days for those things, but we are, as an industry, definitely putting up major points on the board and demonstrating clinical efficacy as well as health economics outcomes. So that'll be the other thing that really accelerates this forward.
Yeah. We've had a few questions come in, and I want to encourage everybody to jump in the chat if you'd like, but also at the bottom you can just ask a question there where it says that link. One of the questions is, and this kind of builds on what you were just talking about there, Aaron, what is the experience like for the patient and the provider? Is it for the majority of the people who aren't maybe in the industry or aren't as technical, they might have an idea of what they think the virtual reality experience looks like. Is it like that? I don't know. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking like a Minecraft kind of simulation where it's blocky. How good is the quality these days? Trisha, jump in on this one if you like.
Yeah, I mean, the pilot testing that we did, the nurses and physicians that we worked with at CHS said it was as close to real life as you can get. And you really are able to get or to generate emotion and that sort of situational awareness that you just don't get out of only cognitive type courses. And so it feels very immersive. It really helps you to, feel like you're in a 3-dimensional universe and that you have, you're getting all this information, sounds, all the stimulation. It's very much like you're in the same scenario and able to kind of coordinate all of the things. And that sort of situational awareness is very, very key in healthcare. In terms of reacting and dealing with multiple scenarios that we do. Certainly in the one that we're working on with in a cardiac arrest, where a team leader is coordinating. So I'm seeing the bed and I see the 5 different nurses and EMTs and physicians around me, and I'm able to look at the monitor up to the side, and I'm able to react to all of these stimulus, and able to make decisions and work with the team. I think that the biggest challenge for me when I was first testing it was just trying to remember the whole team's names. They had name tags on, but just trying to tell, John to do this, Jerry to do this, all of that sort of thing. But it's a really very realistic scenario for providers. We have not worked with patients in VR, only providers.
Okay. Yeah, and sorry about the echo there. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from all of a sudden, but Aaron, let me ask you the same question if we can, and hopefully the echo will disappear. Talk about the experience for the user.
Sure, I can try. The audio is pretty bad right now. Seems to be getting worse.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll jump in, and I assume somebody's working on that.
We're trying, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Could we maybe mute Trisha and see if that'll help? Okay, I think we're better. We're better? Okay. All right, can you all hear me okay now? All right, okay, now I can't hear, but whatever, let's just keep going. What's the experience like? Virtual reality is extremely hard to describe. You have to experience it. So I won't even really try like it. I've shown 2D videos of VR experiences to investors and prospective clients many times, and they never get it. You have to go inside, because what happens in VR, it's a multi-sensory simulation. Generally, it's audio and visual, which are 2 sort of most dominant senses anyway. And the way that we experience that is, of course, through the same sensory pathways that we experience real life. So our brains at a base level, particularly in our kind of older animal brains with the thalamus and visual and sensory cortices, they don't distinguish it from reality. So we measure a thing in VR that we call presence, which is the degree to which you sort of check out of where you were and you feel transported into this virtual environment. And it is something that is very hard to describe, but as soon as you experience it, you kind of get it. And it's this feeling of sort of being transported. The other thing I'll say about it is in terms of what kind of content you experience, it's as varied as real life, right? So there can be gamification, you can move around virtual spaces and engage with things. Like if you're doing a simulation or training, you can be more passive and watch like an educational segment, or you can watch real world 360 video. We do that for patient stories and narratives, where in VR, we have you sitting across from somebody who's telling you their story about their journey. That's really all about building empathy and belief and self-efficacy. So sometimes it's video, sometimes it's CGI, but it feels a whole lot like real life when you're in there, which is what we're after.
Yeah. Are there more gains to be made on that front? What's kind of the next step as you see the technology developing? Is that something, maybe Eller, that you can jump in on? Are you seeing entrepreneurs trying to visualize? I did not mean to make that pun, but trying to visualize kind of what the next iteration might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any new technology like this, there's always going to be advances in just the user aspect of it. I think, as Aaron said, there are a lot of improvements being worked on and being made, which is with the visual piece. But I think it's something that, again, the users are becoming more comfortable with. And so I think, yes, it's going to improve, going to get better. But it just takes using it. I think it takes getting used to actually conducting course learning or being a patient and engaging with your provider in that virtual setting. I think it, as Aaron was saying, it's really hard to just talk about it. You almost have to just do it. And again, that barrier of, you know, the user getting used to or being willing, just, I think that's the biggest thing, is people are, I think, are much more willing to try it and do it than they were. I think previously it's been kind of a cool new technology, but there's never really been a huge like push or desire or need if they could still do it in person. But I think we're seeing that no, a lot of this can be done virtually, and this is, as Trisha was saying, in some ways a much more cost-effective way to do things. Yeah.
Oh, we hearing my echo?
Yeah, could maybe you turn down your volume, Trisha? That might stop it from bouncing back and forth.
Here we go. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, so VR can also be a lot of fun, and I think it's becoming more mainstream. You know, certainly. Oh.
I think the best thing to do is maybe you turn your volume off, but keep your mic on. You're not going to be able to hear us, but turn your sound off.
Yeah, so Trisha, if you turn your volume completely off, so nothing's coming out of your speaker, that might help. Okay, while Trisha's working on that, I'll just add one quick thing, Garrett, about experience. So we've talked about the VR experience. The other aspect is these are digital simulations or experiences which are, depending on how you build it, cloud connected, right? So I assume this is probably true for Trisha's products. It certainly is for ours. We have control over what the patient is experiencing as they progress through these VR programs, and we're logging all of that. So we're able to measure an incredible amount of data about how the patient responds, what they're looking at, what's happening with their biometrics, and all that goes to our cloud platform, where their clinician, who has put them into this program and onto this journey, can monitor either in real time or asynchronously the patient's progress. So you don't have to be an island that's separate and distinct from the therapist. I mean, you can maintain you know, that therapeutic alliance and give a clinician visibility and ongoing control and connectivity to what's happening with the patient. And I suspect in Trisha's products, instructors and others can do that as well, where they can see, how's your training progressing, and are you meeting your goals and accomplishments and so on.
And is that okay now? Perfect. Oh yeah, I was saying VR can be also a lot of fun, and I think it's becoming more mainstream. You know, I have 3 kids, 21, 18, and 12, and now due to COVID, we haven't had a whole lot of things that we've been able to go out and do. So for example, last weekend, myself and my 12-year-old were fishing in Asia on VR, you know, and you could set it to nighttime and you know, very peaceful music. And so I think as it becomes more mainstream now, you know, with all of our, you know, young folks demanding to have the Quest 2 right now, pre-order, and having the PS4 and all of those types of VR vehicles, I think it's going to become something that is probably expected in the next generation, because I think I see a lot of younger people really expecting to have, you know, more experiential type of learning process as opposed to, you know, reading. They're so used to you know, interacting with people, with the iPhones, with all their technology, that, you know, from my experience, at least with my own kids and young adults, I really feel like it's something that we're going to be able to leverage for engagement of employee learning, and I think there's going to be expectations of that on a number of topics.
Trisha, do you see it becoming to, let's say, 15, 20 years from now, where VR accounts for the majority of learning in healthcare, the experiential part? I know Vanderbilt has done some, put in some applications in terms of virtual surgeries. So, you know, obviously, there's only one way to practice real surgery, and that's not necessarily what you want to do, and you don't necessarily want to practice surgery.
Right.
But do you see where virtual reality becomes the norm rather than maybe the exception?
I do think it becoming more predominant over time, because, you know, just in the situation that we're in, we're going to see a lot of clinicians retire over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's, where does all that experience go? And how do I replicate that experience if I don't have those same peer-to-peer groups? And so we're trying to figure out, VR, AR, artificial intelligence. We did work with IBM Watson to do some critical thinking development. And so we're using all of these sort of types of technology, which are all have their benefits in certain areas. But I think we'll be definitely leveraging technology, automation, and much more experiential development in 10, 15 years for sure.
Aaron, I'll throw that same question to you in terms of the expansion outside of behavioral health applications. Are you thinking about some other ways that you can deploy some of this technology?
Yes, we think a lot about what is VR best at. I mentioned that earlier, like you don't want to do everything digital in VR. It's more expensive to create this content still. And while everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket or purse, they don't have a VR headset with them most of the time. So you need to be targeted, right? If it's an experiential learning thing, if it's a simulation you want to put someone in for emotional activation or behavioral activation, that's where it's going to really continue to take ground and be more mainstream. And so, I mentioned earlier the focus of our company is using the fact that we can put people into situations where we can help them diffuse stress and anxiety, and through exposure therapy, really, and neuroplasticity, extinguish fear. That has broad application for not just individual behavioral health conditions that are like where there's a DSM-5 diagnosis code. Certainly it does have implications for that, for generalized anxiety disorder or social anxiety or PTSD or what have you. But there are broader things related to just challenges in life, right? So we've just brought to market our new Nurture VR program for expectant mothers in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy and what some call the 4th trimester, which is when you've just got home with a new baby and life has been turned upside down. And many mothers, virtually all mothers, are going through a lot of stress, and there's a lot of difficulty in adjusting to that phase of life. They're going through physiological changes in their brains and body. They've got all these incredible new demands on their capabilities and time. And, just helping people cope through experiences that build stress resilience, build emotion regulations, help tamp down that anxiety and fear of the unknown and so forth, can have, we think, really powerful effects. And so what I'm trying to articulate is this is not just about single diagnoses or conditions. We humans are much more complicated than that. We need diagnoses and treatments, that at the clinical end of the spectrum, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in between where it's really about dealing with life's challenges and having better coping strategies and being able to put people in engineered experiences that help them calm themselves and build those skills. We think has a huge amount of potential. So we're excited about that future.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. I completely agree, Aaron. I think virtual reality really has the technology allows people to enter into a completely different world, whereas AR, though augmented reality, I think, is probably going to make a huge next step kind of in the next couple of years. I know, is it Apple, or I can't remember, maybe Apple's supposed to launch their AR glasses or something next year, but augmented reality doesn't change or put you in another world or immerse you into another situation, which virtual reality can do. Augmented reality augments your reality that you are existing in. And again, to Aaron's point, I think it really allows, take, for example, in this healthcare setting, a patient to, all of a sudden be removed from whatever traumatic or stressful situation that they're in and put them into a virtual setting that can help lower anxiety, lower blood pressure, things that are going to be necessary in order to treat or help a patient. And I think that's, again, where VR, unlike AR, really can play kind of a key differentiated role in health. It allows you to completely put a patient or an individual into a different setting altogether very easily, which has never been possible before. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to me as we're talking about the one thing that I see VR potentially contributing to is we've written a lot at the Post about how care is becoming increasingly decentralized, right? The hospitals is no longer the place that you go. That one hospital campus, it's in different places and increasingly more in to the home itself. And this seems like if the technology becomes increasingly good, increasingly affordable, that we're going to be able to enable a lot of people to treat themselves better at home, to prevent themselves from needing to go anywhere, and then to Trisha's and HealthStream's point, to educate themselves remotely as opposed to in a central hub.
Yeah, and for all the in-person treatments, like group therapy, the benefits of having, other people around you while you're doing, the hard work, I think is really, the science is backed there, but again, can you do that in a virtual setting? Absolutely. And I think people in some ways, are getting used to that and are encouraged by it. Which, again, if you can get a group of people together virtually, you're going to be able to do much more of that versus kind of the limited in-person meetings. So.
Yeah. And then you're solving access problems, right?
Yeah.
In terms of rural areas and other folks who aren't maybe mobile, you're bringing the care to them the way that the system has really been trying to in a lot of different ways in recent years. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Eller, I was going to transition to that a little bit in terms of the pandemic kind of speeding the adoption of a lot of the technology from the users and the end users, the patients. How are other investors, how are you all thinking about the direction or the amount of money that might need to go to this to really take advantage of this added demand?
Yeah, obviously Jumpstart Foundry, we're early stage investors. And so we are coming in really right as entrepreneurs and innovators are getting products to market. I know Aaron can talk to that. Jumpstart's an early investor, and so for example, BehaVR is a much further along, and I would say needs a bit more capital than, say, like a traditional seed stage investor. That said, I think there's going to be a lot of money, particularly in kind of the Series A, being poured into VR, AR. I think there's money out there that is looking to to be deployed into VR. Where I see, again, like Jumpstart Foundry really playing a role with early stage entrepreneurs is, a lot of these entrepreneurs coming up with different applications for it. Again, we were talking before we went live, but the cost to develop or cost to deploy the actual technology, that's lowering. The cost to actually develop these scenarios or the actual setting, virtual settings, that is still, that's very capital intensive. Which is why I think it's going to take bigger rounds of funding to get really successful VR and AR companies stood up and competing. So I like to see, again, really early stage stuff that is focused on kind of new applications for VR. But once we go, once you kind of have that application stood up, you're very quickly going to need to raise a lot more capital to deploy that technology, whether through a health system or through direct to consumer routes. So,
yeah. Trisha, I want to be careful because HealthStream is a public company, so I know you can't talk about too many details. But in terms of investing and budgeting in VR technologies, how are you all thinking about the next couple of years, having launched this pilot with CHS? Where do you see kind of the investment curve going from your end?
Yeah, I think we're probably in a heavier investment mode in new technology. Learning and development is really our space for only healthcare. And so we need for us to go deep right? And so for, seeing that we started doing the AI last year and had been working on that for 4 years in a particular application with IBM Watson, and had developed a sort of whole taxonomy around competencies of all of our individual staff. But then moving forward, starting to lead into VR, and we found the same things as Eller did with AR and VR, that AR might be great in anatomy and physiology, or when you're about to do a surgery, those types of things, but where VR is much more ready for and useful in experiential learning. And so for us, always trying to keep on the forefront, we're going to be continuing to invest pretty heavily in this type of technology, really for the purposes of learning and development of healthcare professionals.
Aaron, did you want to jump in on anything in terms of the investment curve and how you are thinking about where to spend your money, or how much more money you might need in the next couple of years?
Well, I'd also say we partner with folks like Aaron to try and disseminate a larger bank of expertise. So I think what's happening right now with all the emerging VR is it takes a certain expertise to get to the right content, to get the right outcome. And so we've been talking with a lot of different organizations like Aaron's to really try and drive where is that expertise, because it's not just VR as a category. It's also the content and the way that you're deploying the content in various settings, like Aaron's doing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Trisha, that I'll sort of build on, which is, at some level, we are certainly a VR company because as a medium, it's new. All right, so we kind of baked it into our name, right, just to make it really clear to people, behavioral health and VR, okay? But that was really a function of the newness, and it sort of sets you apart and makes it really clear to people what you're trying to accomplish. But in fact, we're not really a VR company. We are a behavioral health company, right? We're using the medium of virtual reality in certain ways. And healthcare is still healthcare. It's still complex. You still have, the multi-stakeholder landscape of payers versus providers versus consumers. And they all have sometimes aligned and sometimes misaligned incentives and interests, and B2B2C models and all those sorts of things. And so to your question here about capital, certainly some of it is in building the technological frameworks and underpinnings, right? So we've definitely invested a lot of time in our cloud platform. We call it our dynamic experience engine that allows us to connect clinicians to consumers in real time, knit all this together, drive these dynamic experiences from the cloud. But for us, and we're now in our Series A raise, the next stage of our company is really about, most of our capital will go into proving the, with clinical studies, the efficacy and safety of these programs. Today we bring general wellness programs to market. So from an FDA perspective, we're very careful about saying, this is education and engagement and skill building. We're not making claims about treating, curing, preventing. But for at least some of our products, that is in fact where we expect and hope to go. And that takes significantly more capital to invest in the kind of clinical studies and ultimately kind of FDA pivotal trials, if you will. Still not like drug company pipelines, but it's another level of capital intensity. We are fortunate we have a pharmaceutical company partner, a Japanese company that's working with us to co-develop a social anxiety disorder therapeutic, and we have more sort of things planned in that space. So the point being, VR companies or solutions, let me say it that way, VR solutions will be brought to market through a combination of some tech companies who are providing obviously things like headsets and hardware and whatnot, maybe platform companies, and then there will be companies that are really about some therapeutic program, which starts with clinical evidence and translating evidence-based protocols into this new immersive medium, and then taking them through clinical studies to prove safety and efficacy and so on. So in that sense, it will start looking a lot more like other forms of digital healthcare and just healthcare generally, and less like VR over time.
Right. adoption and integration, and it just becomes part of the ecosystem. Yeah. Close to wrapping up here, so please let us know if you have any questions for the panel. My last question really is in terms of, to all the panelists, so jump in if you like, kind of benchmarks or milestones that you might want to see in the next year for VR in healthcare. You know, a headline that you want to see, whether it's Apple or whoever, you know, really committing to it. What's something that you think will get this VR integration into the broader healthcare system kind of over the next hump?
I'll start that one maybe. What I'd like to see, and I think we will see, is we will see digital therapeutics recognized as a reimbursable benefit category. And so without going in the weeds on that, let's just say that's sort of CMS and HHS and maybe some congressional action, but probably not required, to make digital therapeutics a reimbursable service, just like medical devices and human delivered services and pharmaceuticals. That will make a huge difference for DTX generally, and VR will be a part of that ecosystem. So that'll be a big deal.
Yeah, and I think that's current. I mean, that's happening right now. Well, at least the push for policy on that is happening right now. I think there's a lot of, the High Tech Act, like that's coming through, and once not just for VR and AR and digital therapeutics, but once they kind of tie, breakthrough technologies, tying, FDA approval processes to CMS reimbursement, that's going to be, I think, the big ticket item where all of a sudden this is, people are going to adopt it because they know they're going to be reimbursed for it. To follow the money on that one. So that's what I'm excited about, is kind of agreeing with Aaron, is when policy is put in place for both the, the efficacy, but then the reimbursement behind these treatments. So.
Trisha, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, for me in the health systems, I think COVID has really helped us in many ways. And I think, people are looking at trying to be more creative. If we think about all the telehealth adoption that has been going on, I think from a technology perspective, when we started this, we were trying to, move a lot of health systems from IE9 to IE11. And we're just sort of getting to that stage, let alone getting to VR. And when COVID happened, when we saw this, tremendous surgence of telehealth, I think just the systems getting ready for the kind of virtualization of care is going to really benefit us to the point that we can start expanding in a number of areas that we see benefit with VR.
Sorry, there we go, unmiked or unmuted. We do have a question come in from Elizabeth there. Where do you feel mixed reality fits into all this? We've talked about the distinction between VR and AR. Where is mixed reality these days in this?
I'm going to make Aaron go for that one.
That's what I was thinking, Eller.
Okay, so first of all, it's not really like a standalone category so much. I think Eller earlier talked about the difference of VR is immersive and puts you in like whatever engineered place or space we want to put you in, whereas with augmented reality, you see your real world surroundings, but you have an overlay. Mixed reality is when you start blending or switching back and forth between those two. So for instance, Trisha mentioned the Oculus Quest a couple of times, and the Quest 2 is out now. It already has outward facing cameras that it uses to do things like room mapping and make sure you don't run into walls and things like that. But it's there are elements of the experience, I won't go too deep, where if you move outside of that zone, suddenly you go from seeing the VR environment to seeing your real world environment, right? So it's going to depend on use cases. The hardware is going to converge where it could shift back and forth between the two. It will be really about what is the use case, what kind of experience do we want to engineer. Apple never talks about what they're going to do. They never confirm publicly. There are pretty rampant rumors, though, that they are working on a headset that will be mixed reality, meaning it can switch between VR and AR. And for the Apple fans out there, I'm one of them, I can't wait. for many people, it'll be like Apple just invented VR. You know, that'll be a great moment, which is not the case, obviously.
Right.
Yeah,
All of a
I
sudden.
think I look at it more of like, in particularly over the next couple of years, I think it's in the next couple of years, specifically in healthcare, it's going to be point solutions. I don't think the healthcare industry is ready for that mixed setting. I mean, right now, I mean, just the healthcare industry in general is, not necessarily well equipped to be doing whole person care anyway. I mean, they're doing a lot of fixing point problems. You go to a specialist for one thing, and you have to go to another doctor for another. I think back to what I was saying, kind of, if you need a patient to be treated in an immersive setting, VR is going to be the application to use. If you can do it, just by, in a more engaging, but again, in their real world setting, and can use augmented reality, that's going to be great. I don't quite see the use case with the traditional health setting and the way healthcare is delivered right now for mixed reality. I agree with Aaron, and I'm super excited personally just about mixed reality. I think that is going to make leaps and bounds in just, our world and our lives. But I think, again, specifically for healthcare, it's going to take a little bit of time.
All right. One last quick question. Make this like a quick little rapid fire round robin if we want. Until Apple invents VR for the mass consumer, what headset or system should users, experimental or individual users, invest in today? What's the best deal out there to get started?
I personally like the Quest, Oculus Quest, and I've tried all the sort of different ones, and I've gotten a little dizzy in certain with certain glasses and in other cases and in certain cases, but I really like the Oculus Quest. I haven't tried Quest 2, but the Oculus Quest is fairly cost efficient in terms of long-term use and all the use that you can get out of it, and doesn't require a lot of software, expensive software. So would say the Quest.
And what's the rough price point that people are looking at these days for that?
Just a few $100s.
Okay.
Which is like significantly less than what it was a year ago. I mean, and I think, again, I completely default to Aaron and Trisha on this, but I would say anything that is relatively low cost but highly programmable, anything that's easy to integrate and work with, other softwares. So
Yeah,
agree.
For an at-home user, hands down, it's the Quest 2, which is brand new. $299 is the entry point, and there's some add-ons if you want special straps and more comfort and things. The downside of the Quest 2, and this is controversial, is Facebook, who bought Oculus back in 2015 or so. They have just recently adopted a stance where the only way to use your Quest 2 is with your Facebook account. So you have to embrace that you're working with Facebook. I'll just stop at that. But it is hands down the best experience and best equipment and sort of hardware and experience today, no question.
Aaron, what would you say for entrepreneurs that are looking to kind of build on top of, like, build new technology with?
So that's a little more complicated. If you depends on the setting. I know we don't have much time. If I was running like enterprise solutions, and I suspect this is exactly what Trish is doing, Oculus has a thing called Oculus for Business, where you pay a little more for the hardware, but you get to manage it like an enterprise tool set and things. If you're deploying out to users' homes, but you're not having them buy the hardware, Oculus is not a good option because of licensing and other things. We use this Pico G2 4K. Pico's quite a good product. It's not quite on the level of the experience of the Quest, but it's really close, and it gives you great enterprise tools and management and so on. So those are the two leaders for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good little bit of intel for the average user here. Appreciate you all. Thank you very much, Eller, Trisha, and Aaron. thank you all for watching. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of goodies to give away, so I want to make sure I get this right. So Fifth Third is giving one of our attendees a Nashville Predators gift pack that features a custom engraved wine bottle, a hat, and a travel mug. So Eller, can I put you on the spot? Can you give me a number? We had 92 people register here today. Can you give me a number between 1 and 92? And that I've got our handy list right here, and I'll be able to find our winner there.
Oh man, I'm gonna be bold and just say number 3.
Number 3.
Early. I'm not gonna go in the middle. I'm going early. Number 3.
That's great. Alice Reitmeyer. I hope I got that right. You are our lucky winner. So appreciate you being that. Eller, thank you, and we'll be in touch with Alice. Also, look for, in the next couple of days, everyone, an email from us on behalf of the team at Bridge Connector. They want to send you a gift as well. So we'll be asking you for an address, and they'll be sticking that in the mail for you. Really appreciate their support from Fifth Third and from Bridge Connector. Also from our partner at Tennessee Hymns. Again, if you're looking for more of this type of content, they've got great educational programs, including one here coming up in the next few weeks at tnhims.org, tnhims.org. And with that, we will say thank you one more time to our panelists. Thank you, everybody, for listening and joining us today for the questions. And we'll say goodbye with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Take care,
folks.
all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, I'm Dave Briggs, Regional President of Fifth Third Bank of Tennessee. What a difference a year makes. The COVID experience challenged each of us to pause for a moment and think about new ways to continue to serve Nashvillians, businesses, family, and our community. As one of the country's largest banks, 9th largest in the U.S., we're big enough to provide sophisticated solutions, expert guidance, while at the same time, we're empowered to make local decisions, to invest in Nashville's future, to serve community agencies, help Nashville and you to rebound from the challenges of 2020. During the pandemic, we've helped thousands gain financial relief or assistance from the hardships they are facing. We funded local hunger, education, housing, and social service initiatives. And we are working with civic leaders to help jumpstart our economy. We're here for you. We are invested in Nashville, and we're invested in our future. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our hosts for giving us this chance to hear from leaders in an industry that is the backbone of Nashville.
I'm David Wenger, founder and CEO of Bridge Connector, a company changing the way healthcare communicates. We provide a scalable solution for big technology vendors, digital health, providers, and payers. We allow them to automate the workflows between the disparate technologies that they've already bought to make sure that they work seamlessly across the spectrum of care and to make sure that ultimately we create a successful patient experience. Thank you for joining today's event. I encourage you to visit us at bridgeconnector.com to learn more.